This is Harry Murray at Murray's Fly Shop in Edinburgh, Virginia. Today, let's talk about the deer hair bass bugs. I just simply enjoy using the deer hair bugs. These go back to H.E. Tapley, Taps Tips from the magazines 50 years ago, and even back to Ray Bergman's flies pre 50 years ago, where they really had a lot of good deer hair bugs. The reason I go to them primarily in low water time when things are spooky and all that, I can cast a deer hair bug further than I can a popper of the same size. Plus, one thing we do have going for it, and I ran into this when I was making a video for the Game Commission one time, these bugs have a soft texture. The bass will definitely hold on to this bug longer than they will a hard popping bug. I was making a video for the Game Commission and I shoved it over against the bank, sat there, and I looked up to talk to the videographer. The bass had actually sucked my deer hair bug under and basically hooked himself. That would not happen with a popping bug. But so it has characteristics that we like to use, and basically from a historical point of view, I just enjoy using them. Let's look at some of the individual bugs. We'll show you where and how, and to a certain extent, when you can fish them. This is the tail of the pool. This current is going from right to left. In the tails of these pools, which are, say, a foot to maybe 3 feet deep, in the evening, the smallmouth bass move back into those areas to feed on the minnows that are back there. There are a lot of chub minnows back there, a lot of dace back in there, and we can easily duplicate that with our deer hair tying technique. What Jeff is doing there, he has waded into that pool and started with his first cast falling over at point number 1. He's going to strip that back toward him with sort of a strip, pause routine. Now, in many cases, as the light's getting off the water, you will actually see the wake of these bass going in there to feed on these minnows. If Jeff sees a wake of a bass shooting back in there toward number 1, he's going to make a cast right away out ahead of where he sees the wake of that bass. It works. We do that a whole lot. After he would catch that bass, or maybe 2 of them up where we're seeing number 1, he's going to pick that up and shove it back against that bank. Now remember, that current's flowing to the left, and Jeff will cast back to where you see number 2. He's going to cover the water, whether he sees these wakes from these bass or not. He's going to cover that water, swimming those floating minnows back through there, and it is very effective. Probably the most effective smallmouth fishing I have would be the last hour of daylight and the last, we'll say, 100 feet of the tail of the pool. I just never pass them up. After Jeff would catch a bass or 2 back there at number 2, he'll retrieve that fly, shove it back there at number 3, and again, he's going to strip that out toward him. Usually, the retrieve will be strip, pause, strip, and he's swimming it across there. But again, if he sees a bass headed for a minnow back in there, he'll see the wake of that bass. He'll see the bass's tail almost slashing through the water. He's going to pick that up and shove it right straight out in front of that bass. So the tail of the pool with these Murray's floating minnows is just so much fun. I've introduced this to a lot of close fishing friends, and they just love it. And it is effective. Let's look at our potential with deer hair bugs that are carved to match the mice that live along that bank. If you'd walk down along that bank in front of Jeff, there would be little mice running all over the place back in there. Now, they're obviously going to be close to the bank. They're not intentionally going to get out in the stream, but they do get out in there some. So Jeff would make his first cast right straight into that number one, drop it as close to the bank as he could get it, and use a line hand retrieve. You can see he's getting a hold of that right now, and he's going to fish that out very slowly, maybe 10 feet. Pick it up, shove it back in toward the number two, and he's got to watch out for those tree limbs, but now he might make a sidearm cast to shoot it back under those tree limbs because he does want to get it as close to the bank as he can, and he'd fish that out 5 or 10 feet. Go down to number three, shove it right back against there, and many times now the strike will come pretty quickly. It's really good fishing, it's fast fishing, and it's fairly easy fishing. Some of these mice that we're tying are huge. We have one we call the Minnie Mouse and the Mouse Rat. I like to use a smaller one, to be perfectly honest, but they're both very effective and they do the job. That current is going to the left, so Jeff could work his way all the way down. As long as he has a bank that looks like what you see in front of him, he might be able to fish a half a mile of that type thing, and he'll be catching fish all the way along the Rhine. We have a broad variety of what I would call standard deer hair poppers. The Shenandoah popper, the deer hair bass bug, Tapley, H.G. Tapley. These were the first ones, and they're streamlined, and they let me cast them further than I can cast a popping bug. Now that current is coming over Jeff's left shoulder. That current is draining out of that pool. He would wade into the spot that you see right now. We go to this late in the day, late in the season when the water is getting low. You can tell from those grass beds on the far side, water is actually flowing much smaller volume than what you would normally encounter early in the summer. So we're going late in the day, late in the season, make a cautious approach. All right, Jeff's first shot would be to number one, and he would fish that out right toward him with that pause strip type retrieve. Now, and if you so desire, you can dress these with a silicone floating, and it keeps them floating higher and drier. And after you catch a dozen fish or so, you may want to bring them back and just squeeze them to squeeze the water out, put some floating back on it, and away you go. Okay, so after Jeff has caught that first bass right there, he's going to shove his next bug right back against that bank on the far side. Now remember, this is late in the year and the water is low and the fish are spooky. So Jeff was almost be sure of catching a bass against that number two spot. I have fished this hundreds of times and I know the water very well. So after he catches that, he's going to pick it up and shoot at number three, which is just a little bit up. That's coming around that current. And swinging to Jeff's left, he'll catch that one. He'll work on upstream. Now he's staying back. He'll almost walk in a straight line from where he is to where he can get up to number four, and he's going to shove that hair bug back up in there. And this is very effective. I do it often, especially, we'll say, mid-September, something like that. When the water is low and the fish are spooky, use these standard bugs that we are here. See, they're all, if you look at those pictures in the lower part of the screen, you can see they're streamlined. not just the tapley bug, but all of these are streamlined to where you can cast them a long way. I would be using a bright butt 9-foot 2X leader on them, but you can shove these a country mile and catch a lot of fish in there in low, spooky conditions. The Dalberg bug is very clever and designed. If you look at the bug over on the right, you'll see that the tire has actually clipped the nose on that bug, so it's got sort of a GI haircut with that hair sticking up in the top. Well, now what that gives us the capacity to do is to make it jump and dive and jerk all across. Jeff would wade into the river from the left side to where you see him there. His first cast will be to that spot number 1. He's going to use a line hand retrieve, pointing the rod tip right straight where the bug's coming out. And he'll use a firm line hand retrieve. Experiment with making the bug sort of jump to the left, jump to the right, even dive down in there. The versatility of that fly is just unbelievable. After Jeff would catch a couple fish there, he's going to shove it right straight back out into that faster water. Now notice that current's going to your right there. He's going to shove it back out to number 2 where that water is deeper and faster. He's still again going to use a line hand retrieve and just to make that bug jump and dive and do everything. Then after he catches those, he can go back out, even into the very heaviest water out there at 3, swim that across the stream with that diving and jumping action, catch 2 or 3 back there, shove it all the way over to that far side at number 4, and continue that same action. The Dalberg is so versatile. What you get out of it is going to depend on just how creative you are in imparting that action. But now remember, you want your rod tip pointing at it. You're not going to be jerking the rod to the right or the left. You want the rod tip pointing right at it, so when you want to impart that action, you can make it do what you want to do. So how creative you are depends on what you're going to get out of the Dalberg bug. Smallmouth bass love to feed on the frogs that live more or less along the bank and in those grass beds you see on the far side. Jeff would be working downstream to his left, currents flowing to our left. He'd cast right over it, tight at that bank, and he could get it on his first shot. And again, it's basically that same strip, pause, strip action. And fish it out maybe 10 feet, pick it up and go back in there again, tight to the bank, just as tight as he can get it back on number 2. And many times that strike will come within the first 2 or 3 seconds. So when you're making that cast, let it, as soon as it touches the water, you pick it up with your line hand and get tight to it, because the strike may come in the first 2 or 3 seconds. You'll catch 2 or 3 fish in there, go to point number 3, which is back in where there are going to be some of the larger bass feeding on the various frogs that are back in there. So they're always there, and it is very effective. I use this a lot late in the evening, and I might cover 100 yards doing that type action, just basically fishing from the bank out 10 feet and just keep working down the river, down the river, down the river. But the whitlock frog is an exceptionally good frog. It's durable. It has a weed guard on there that does help if you really are going to be around the weeds. This is Harry Murray again. I'm glad you could join us on our trip through deer hair bass bug land. We do the schools almost every week, Some of them are full day schools, some half day schools. I've written 2 different books on smallmouth bass. One of these is showing a lot of the locations on the James, New, Clinch, all of those rivers. Very informative on that. We sell the rod reel combinations. We recommend going to a 7 weight for this. Now, when we're doing our classes, we do provide the rod and reel for you to use. A lot of special flies. We probably have, I don't know, 20,000 flies over here in our bins. I've designed, at least 30 or 40 of them that are what we might call specialty flies that we find very effective. And many of them are deer hair flies. So if you have any question on this, you can go to our website at murraysflyshop.com, or you can call us at 540-984-4212. We'll be glad to help you. And when you're in this area, please stop in. I have the maps that show all of these areas for the next 100 miles in all directions. So just stop in and we'll be glad to help you any way we can. Thank you very much for going with us.